Good morning. Good morning. We are going to get started in a few minutes talking all about artificial intelligence and closing the skills gap, what we can do as an organization, as a leader to make sure that we are as prepared as possible for the new requirement of skills that we will have of our employees in the future. I am so excited to have Ivan Portilla with us today. He is going to share valuable insight on what we can do. I know that you're going to appreciate this conversation. Plus, you won't hear me talk the whole time, which is probably great for some of you that have attended ours. But just as we're getting started, knowing that we have a few minutes, go ahead and throw in the chat. I would love to see where you're from. Just go ahead and put where the state, the city, the country that you're in. Also say good morning and get excited. I know it's bright and early. Here it's 9 a.m. in Denver, but we know that some of you are joining us from the East Coast. I see someone I think that might be from Pennsylvania, but we want to hear where you're from. So just go ahead and throw in the chat box where you're from and maybe something that you're excited to learn today. Maybe something that you want to hear about in terms of AI. Awesome. McLean, Virginia. So nice to have you, Barbara. This is fantastic. Thinking about AI, what are things that you're curious about? Because Ivan will also be answering questions in the end. He is going to present for a few minutes to talk about and building that case for the skills development, for why we actually need to pay attention to AI. And it's not just something that we can say, we don't actually impact that, because we all likely work with AI, whether we realize it or not. Yeah, we've got Philly. We've got Sharon. Welcome from Trinidad and Tobago. So happy to have you. Morocco, so great to have you. And yeah, just throw in your chat. Good morning. Oh, we've got someone from Spud Software in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and they can't wait to hear how AI is a good thing. Yeah. Yvonne, would you say AI is a good thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we know AI is a good thing, but it does get a bad rap. And maybe you'll touch on that too, that people are a little intimidated by AI. They don't necessarily know what to expect or how it could potentially impact them down the lines, which can be a little, a little unnerving. So we're going to get started in another minute. Again, go ahead, throw where you're from in the chat. Also throw why you're excited to be here. Why did you come to a webinar on AI? There are so many reasons, but we want to hear why you decided to come. And Yvonne, I'm going to go ahead or in a minute, I'll be going ahead because we're only 1 minute to countdown. For those that are unfamiliar, we've got another Virginia Beach. Hi, Patty, how's it going? I hope everyone loves the call outs because it's just so great to try and make this personal. We know that if we can't be together in person, we've got to do our best to make this exciting, energized, so we feel connected and just open to learning. Hello, Van. So happy to have you from Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. It is 9 a.m. Denver time, which means that it is time to go. Great to have you, Steve, from Toronto. We are starting out with talking about artificial intelligence. And one of the important things to think about as we do this, as more and more artificial intelligence is entering the world, more and more emotional intelligence must enter into leadership. AI, artificial intelligence, or AI as it's commonly known, is something that we can't ignore. And it's something that we need to be very attentive to as leaders to know how are we actually skilling our workforce to prepare for these changes that artificial intelligence will bring. It's not something that's just resigned to a room where there's a data scientist reading all of your data. It's actually something that we all need to be a part of. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with Yvonne. For those that don't know me, I'll just be your host today. My name is Jen DeWall, and I am a leadership development strategist and facilitator for Crestcom. You can always email me if you have questions or connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'm so excited to be bringing you Yvonne. For those that are unfamiliar with Crestcom, just a very brief overview. We're a global leadership development organization that focuses on developing managers into leaders. And today's topic is one of the things that's going to be very important for you as a leader. You need to understand soft skills. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce the man that you will be hearing from, Ivan Portilla, who is a data scientist with IBM Edge Consulting. He's an author, a speaker, and he's recognized for his innovative work in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Yvonne is also a member of the IBM Academy of Technology. And today, Yvonne is going to be talking about how you can upskill or prepare your workforce with the skills that they need to lead in the age of AI. Yvonne, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so then you can go ahead and start. But oh my gosh, because you just have so much to share. So go ahead and start your share here, Yvonne. And again, you can throw in your chat where you're from. I know Yvonne would love to see where you're from as well. But Yvonne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jen. Can you hear me okay?
I'm going to go ahead and take my camera off too, just so they can focus on you.
Okay, perfect. And hello, everyone. I'm going to share on the chat. If you look in your Q&A bubble there, I'm going to share a link to the report that we're going to be using for this talk. So I'm going to share my screen now. And please let me know, Jen, if you can see here.
There we go. Perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. So before I started, IBM legal team asked me to say this. This is my views, my opinions, not of my employer. So this is a typical disclaimer that you've seen in many, many talks. So with that, let's talk about the topic today. We're going to be talking about how to close that skills gap on the enterprise using artificial intelligence. We're going to share some strategies and some results from a multi-year study. Again, the link is there and it's also on the chat. And here's my contact information. So I would love to hear from you. I'm currently a data scientist on the IBM Edge Computing team. I'm in charge of pushing AI to the edge. So with that, let's get started. So Jen, you can hear me okay, right? And everything looks good?
Everything looks great.
And you're recording this, correct?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So our agenda for today will be very simple. We're going to focus on 4 areas. We're going to talk about skills, the importance of skills and talent in the organization. We're going to see some of the challenges that currently people are going through with the skills acquisition and the skills lifetime. And then most importantly, the impact of intelligent automation. How is artificial intelligence impacting the skills shortage in your organization? And then we're going to close with some strategies, some recommendations from the authors of the studies to close that skill gap using AI. So very simple agenda. So with that, let's get started. So what would you say is the main differentiation between a $2 trillion company and your average startup? It's not the multi-billion circle building or the release of a brand new gadget every year. It's the skills that organizations have to innovate and thrive in the marketplace. And these skills are fueling the global economy. They're creating new opportunities. When they go into a particular location, they are bringing talent, high talent to that location. They're paying taxes. They're creating better infrastructure. Currently, it's interesting to see with this global pandemic, the migration to other zones so people can work remotely from home. But again, skills are fueling the global economy. And when we talk to these technology leaders, CEOs from thousands of companies in dozens of industries in multiple regions and countries, we're noticing several important key factors here. That not only technical skills are important, now we're seeing people skills or soft skills are gaining importance in these organizations. Particularly, our performance in these organizations, they place skills as the foundation to grow, to innovate, to go into new markets areas. And they put a lot of emphasis on investing in acquiring new skills in their organizations. However, this skill shortage has been remediated with hiring and training, but that's not enough. Unfortunately, they cannot get all the skills they need. So we are coming out with new ways to gain those, particularly the soft skills, the behavioral skills. And organizations that are doing 2 things. One thing is they are tapping into the mid-career employees, usually people in the 30s, 40s, that have been with the company 10, 20 years. And they're going to retrain these mid-career workers to gain the behavioral skill, the soft skills to innovate. However, we also come up with a program at IBM, and our former CEO, Ginny Rometty, called it the New Collar Jobs. And these are jobs that will require more than a high school, but not necessarily a college degree. There are certain skills like web design or cybersecurity that a good community college or some additional experience past high school will give you those skills. So we created a program that we call P-TECH, and this is Pathways to Technology in Early College and High School. And with this program, we train students entering high school in the US 9th grade. In 6 years after 9th grade, which means high school plus 2 additional years in a community college, they get an associate degree and they can get hired by companies like ours. And we're currently in 24 countries, and we are working with 220 school partners and additional 200 college partners to educate these kids on the P-TECH program. And that's something that I'm personally involved. I'm a volunteer and a mentor here in Colorado, and I teach a weekly class on data and AI to these kids. And it's interesting to see a brand new perspective of a high school student be able to grasp the complexity of these topics. In addition, and I strongly recommend you to check out that website, ptech.org. In addition to training these students, we also open up a new infrastructure of learning. And this is free digital content in areas that we believe are important in the marketplace right now. So you can go ahead and enroll, here's the URL, and take classes in cybersecurity, in data science, in professional skills, even in artificial intelligence. And you will earn certificates, we call it IBM badges, that tell us that you have taken the class and have completed successfully the requirements. So both of those strategies are being used to help close that skill gap. Here's an example. This summer, we had a hackathon as part of the COVID-19 effort in our company. And my students and I came up with the idea of connecting students with senior citizens in adult care centers through correspondence. So they will write letters to the senior citizens, but we were able to match them using a personality API in the IBM data and AI portfolio. So we analyzed the way they write, and we were able to match compatible personalities through this tool. And that was very interesting to see the students come up with the idea, develop the algorithm, and apply it to be able to connect several schools in the area with adult centers. So that was a very impressive effort. Now let's talk about what are the executives considering are the soft skills, the behavioral skills that are important to them. So on this survey from 2016 to 2018, we noticed a very interesting trend. If you see in blue, those are the soft skills or behavioral skills. And notice that the most important one that in 2018 was this agility, this willingness to be flexible, to adapt to change. And you can see that nowadays with the pandemic. How can you remote disconnected from your team, working remote? Also, they consider time management, not need to be supervised, be able to prioritize your work, ability to work with in a multi-diversity environment. And that's very important because right now our nation, we're seeing all these issues happening with race. So be able to work with people in different minorities, different cultural backgrounds is very important for them. And also the ability to speak up. I try to, in my class, encourage my students to present, to develop those communication skills, both oral and written. So notice the shift in what executives consider important for those skills from 2016 to 2018. A lot of emphasis on those soft skills. Now, when they look at what is the criteria for successful innovation, again, soft skills make the top of the list. working as a team, be able to be flexible, demonstrate a strong leadership. And none of this can be taught in a formal class. This is something that you gain with experience. And that's why it's so important to us to take these very young students and be able to share with them what is a real working environment look like. Now let's talk about the challenges of those skills. This is the second area that I wanted to share from this study. What do you think are today's challenges with your skills? So the employers share these statistics, and these all are well documented on the white paper. Interesting here is that in typical organizations, about half of the employers say they cannot find the skills they need. And if you go to larger organizations, they go almost 2/3. They cannot find the skills they need to be successful in the marketplace. And the reason they say it is because the candidates don't have the experience, 20%, or they have to retrain, reskill in order to be competitive, to be relevant in the marketplace. Some of the other metrics on these slides, we believe, or they believe by 2030, there will be a shortage of about 85 million people with those skills. So one of the reasons that we have these challenges with skills is something, it's called the half-life of a skill. And what this means is, how long would it take for your skill to become obsolete, half of your skill to be obsolete? And this is been noticed that currently it's about 5 years. So think about that. You went to school, you went to a community college, you went to a training facility. In about 5 years, your skills are being half relevant. So that's a huge impact compared to a few years ago when your half-life of skills will be something more like a decade or 15 years. So that's a huge impact in being relevant at the workplace. Now, not only that, the half-life of the skill is in jeopardy, also the time to gain that skill. I remember a few years ago, if I needed to gain a new skill, I will go to class for 4 or 5 days and I'll be proficient on that particular skill. Nowadays, if I want to learn a new skill, it will take me more like 40 days, like 2 months almost. And this is also because the depth of the skill, skills are become very specialized. Like if I wanted to get a data science skill, I need to learn math, I need to learn to program, I need to learn communication and so on. And also because all the skills that are needed today are also soft skills, things that you need to grow in an environment that you cannot learn as traditional classroom education or virtual education. So this is the impact of that. And in fact, 41% of organizations, they say that they have only the skills that they need to go to be successful in the marketplace. So almost half of the organizations have the skills that they need to be successful. And that's a huge gap on the skills that they need right now. The third topic, and this is something very close to what I do every day at work, is what is called intelligent automation. That can be both a good thing and a negative thing, an opportunity and a challenge. And I'm showing here a picture of one of my robots that I work with. It's called Pepper. And Pepper is a humanoid robot created by a Japanese company, SoftBank Robotics, that we have taken to different environments like a hotel, concierge, or banks, or retail. And let me tell you a little bit about intelligent automation. So the impact of intelligent automation is that it's going to improve the processes, business processes, and provide consumers, users with personalized experiences, as well as enhancing decision-making. Unfortunately, there is also an impact on that intelligent automation. And this is not new. We have had automation for thousands of years. We have, this is what is called the fourth industrial revolution. We also have like the steam, electricity, agriculture. We have a lot of automation in our history. But the reason that intelligent automation is more critical is because it's using advances in artificial intelligence, where machines can learn from data and they don't have to be explicitly programmed to produce those predictions or recommendations. It is having a positive impact, and here are some of the areas that we have been working in my company. I particularly been involved in finance fraud detection. For example, a few years ago, I worked with a large credit card bank, and we were dealing with about 60,000 transactions per minute. Imagine being able to approve or disapprove a transaction, and if you get a lot of false positive, the merchant is losing money, the credit card company is losing money, and most importantly, you have a frustrated consumer. I also work with manufacturing. On this edge computing, we are putting AI closer to where the data is captured. So we're detecting, for instance, in a manufacturing line where there's a defective part, we can detect it right there before it goes, for instance, into a car, and you get a bad experience as a consumer. So we're pushing AI to the edge. We're also working with transportation. Right now, particularly with the low demand in air travel, we're helping several airlines predict when travel is going to recover and be able to be prepared for that. So these are some of the areas that we're working with artificial intelligence. This is what the executives share with us that is important, the positive impacts of intelligence automation. One of the areas I want to highlight here, one of the metrics, is the increase in insights from data. So every day we produce about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. This is about 2.5 exabytes of data. And most of this data, we call it dark data. About 80% of that data is not being processed right there. It's locked in silos, it's unstructured data. So how do you count thumbs up? Or how do you count videos? How do you analyze all that data? And I also want to point out that it's improving worker productivity. So in IBM, we say it's not artificial intelligence. We switch the acronym. We say it's intelligence augmented. We are freeing up the humans to do higher level thinking, apply what the humans are good at, such as creativity and innovation. So there's some of the areas. And they're also reporting organization capabilities, expansion, and improved productivity. But there's a significant impact to the workforce. About 2/3 of people will require new roles in reskilling that they don't exist today. For instance, have you ever heard of a term, robotic psychology? Be able to understand why your smart speaker is recommending you something, if it has something of that nature. And there's advancements in robotics and automations that will require new skills in the next 5 years. So let me give you some specific metrics of what those mean. So when we did this study, and the executives shared that in the 12 largest economies, about 3.5% of jobs will be displaced or redeployed. And what that means is about 60 million jobs will be replaced by intelligence automation. So that's a huge impact on those people losing their jobs. And if we look broader, we believe that about 120 million people in the 12 largest economies will need to have to be reskilled or retrained in the next 3 years with intelligence automation. And the reason for that, if you think about 120 million, it's about the economies of the labor force from Brazil and Canada combined. And all of that because intelligence automation is making it easier to personalize processes, improve productivity, and give you enhanced decision capabilities. So there's a real potential, challenge here with intelligence automation. One of my favorite books, AI Superwords by Kai-Fu Lee, talks about this representation of what type of jobs are in danger. And I have also a link there, will robots take my job.com, where he shows you a quadrant of how social or asocial your job is compared to the dexterity of that job in the unstructured environment. So he has these safe zones. So jobs that have a higher social interaction, like your hairstylist or your physical therapist or your counselor, that they live in a very unstructured environment, that they will be safe from this intelligence automation. And then he has a danger zone where there's a lot of repetition. There's a very little interactive contact with people, like a dishwasher or a truck driver that have the highest risk of being displaced by intelligence automation. And they have these two other zones, the human veneer, where even though you have a very structured, repeatable job, you have a lot of social interaction, makes you a way to still be safe. And there is an area that he calls slow creep, where even though you have a very little contact, you have a high structure, unstructured environment, which eventually will become the danger zone. Now let's look at what executives are expecting on this impact on advance, prepare for advances in intelligent automation. So in this chart, I'm showing two colors, is what they believe is important for the impact of intelligence automation and how nations are preparing for that. So that's the confidence they have that, for instance, developing the science, technology, engineering, and math skills, they believe it's 40%, but only 54% of the countries are preparing for that area. And we have other, like promoting creativity or providing reskilling. So it's not just responsibility of the employer, also the nations and organizations need to be prepared for this skills shortage. So with that, let's talk about the main area of my presentation. How do we close that gap, skills gap, using artificial intelligence and some of the recommendations from this study? Again, we frame it as a national, regional challenge, helping with the industry or the enterprise, but the individual is also responsible. You are responsible for this upskilling or reskilling of your skills. So organizations know that they need to act, that there's going to be a skills shortage, and unfortunately only half of organizations are doing nothing to retrain you. Very few are retraining in one or two skills, and that's a huge gap. So if the organization is not helping you, then it's pushed to the individual or the regional or nation to close that skill gap, which is very worrisome. So the studies propose 3 areas that we can use artificial intelligence to close that gap, having skills at the center of this strategy, and we divide it up into 3 areas. We call the first one, make it personal. The second one, turn up the transparency of those skills, and then reach out outside of your organization. So let me go into every single one of these areas with an example of how we can close the skill gap using artificial intelligence. Let's start with the make it personal. So I'm going to start with my own company. In IBM, we open it up the transparency and personalization of your skill, reskill, and training. And personalization is important to us because imagine when you go to a movie site and you want to see a particular movie or a movie for a particular genre, you want the tools to be able to predict what you're going to watch or what you're going to buy on a commercial website. So personalization also works with the companies. They want to personalize what skills are needed in the marketplace. What gaps do they have? So when I log into this website, internal website, it's called MindLearning, my employer is providing me a roadmap. It's telling me, based on your experience and based on the market needs, these are the skills that you need that will make you successful and will make the company successful. So today, 8 out of 10 employees have the skills that they need to be successful compared to 3 out of 10 less than 5 years ago. So that's transparency and personalization strategy. The second one is being transparent. So we have an example here of a larger telecommunication company in the US, AT&T. In 2015, they opened it up to all the employees and say, this is where we need to be successful in the marketplace. And look at what jobs are in high demand compared to jobs that we believe are going to become obsolete in the next few years. And they crafted a curriculum based on that strategy. They say, for you to be successful in our company and to make our company successful in the marketplace, these are the jobs that we would like you to take. These are the skills that we would like you to learn. So they open up, they work with massive online companies like Udacity and a local university, and they created this curriculum for the employees. And that was the transparency. Be open on what they need and what they want you to learn based on market needs. And the third one is a very interesting one because every company thinks that they can do this on their own. So we have here a company called Cemex, Cementos Mexicanos. It's a global cement and heavy construction company. They partner with us, and we put together in a university, we put together a program to do digital transformation, and they established a digital hub in Monterrey in Mexico to grow these skills with industry partners. And they use the universities, we use the MMOC, the multi-online learning, like Coursera and Udacity, and they create this curriculum. So not single company is able to work alone. They need to expand both internal and external to reach and close this skill gap. So to recap, to close that skill gap, make it personal, customize the learning to your individual needs and your company, open up, be transparent, create some recognition, tell your employees what the market needs are, and then look inside and out of your company to find those skills. So with that, this is the link to the study, and this is the authors. Thank you very much to these authors to create this wonderful study. And let's open it up for questions and answers. Jen?
All right, let's hear Q&A. So much of that white paper, for those that maybe joined late, what Ivan just presented was based on findings that IBM found from a multi-year global survey. And there's a lot of data in there. I would definitely recommend checking it out and just seeing what you can learn, because it is pretty glaring to know that half of executives surveyed feel like their organizations are not pursuing anything to close the skills gap. So we need to be mindful that what we are doing or what we're not doing today could essentially pull us back. But go ahead, if you have questions for Ivan, I'm going to start with a few, but if you have questions for Ivan, his role in AI, how he supports IBM, anything regarding what we talked about with the white paper, go ahead and throw that in the chat. Ivan, if you want to stop sharing your screen, you can absolutely do that. But just know that Ivan's contact information is there. It's ivanp@us.ibm.com. And if you want to find him on Twitter, it's iPortilla, or you can connect on LinkedIn at Ivan Portilla. So, because now we see, I think, Ivan, we can see just your background, not really that slide screen now. So things to consider is that by 2030, from this white paper, by 2030, the global talent shortage could reach more than 85 million people. So the issue is not necessarily a shortage of workers, but it's a shortage of workers with the right skill. Ivan, what are some of to be specific, like what are some of the skills that you see as essential for leaders today?
One area that I believe is critical is this agility, be able to adapt to change, and particularly what is called agile learning. So we want to create a culture of lifelong learning. Everything that you learn in school and college will be obsolete. We saw there 5, 10 years. So you need to keep yourself current. What are the upcoming trends that I'm going to be good at or I find interesting? How can I improve my skills in those areas? How can I communicate well with others? So not only the technical skills, but also the soft skills. How can I work with people from other cultures? How can I adapt to change? How can I be flexible and react to this, for instance, this pandemic? How can I work from home successfully, be my own boss, be successful in that area?
Yeah, connecting with others. I think when I think, before I kind of got into understanding this subject, is that artificial intelligence lends itself to more data or analytical skills, whereas it really does lend itself to understanding how are you communicating. Artificial intelligence is going to give you data, but you're going to share that data. You're likely also going to transcend cultural borders. So you need to understand how to work with different people. You need to, from the analytical perspective, yes, you need to understand how to look at the data, but you also need to understand how to make the right decisions with that data, which goes into one interesting thing that um, came from that white paper that I saw, is that data has been referred to as the new natural resource, with an article from The Economist going as far as just saying it's going to replace oil as the world's most valuable resource. How do you explain that, Ivan? That is a bold claim, if I've ever heard one, that it's the new natural resource.
Yes, so none of these AI technologies works without data. So it all's based on the data that you use to train and to train these machine learning models. So no data, no intelligence, no predictions, no decision making. So being able to control that data is so critical that a lot of companies are giving you services for that data. For instance, they give you email for free, or they give you social media for free so you can communicate with your peers and your family and friends. But because the data that you generate, it is so important to them to predict trends, to find needs in the marketplace, that data is the differentiator. And this is an important point, because when you sign up for a service via social media, movie, anything, remember that terms and conditions document. You are giving away your data to this company, and you're deciding what companies will be successful in the marketplace. So if you give it to company A, company B will not get your data, and it will be, deprecating, will not be able to compete with a larger company. So you are deciding each day, when you use those social media recommendations, even clicks on a website, you are deciding what companies will succeed in the marketplace by giving them your data. And the second thing is that data has a lot of implicit bias. And I believe that can be a topic for a follow-up conversation, Jen. When we look at what is causing all these predictions to go towards prejudice, or go to racial profiling, or go to discrimination. And it all goes back to the data that was used to train those models. So we need to be very transparent on the data that we use, the machine learning algorithms that we use to train the data, in order to justify a decision. So that's important. And the third thing I want to emphasize is that, as we saw with economies of scale, with the data, you will have less and less competition. So you will have one social media, one email company, one search engine, because they have a monopoly on the data. So that's a good point to consider.
I think even the awareness that data has become this form of currency. Every company wants it because they can use it to identify and predict your behaviors that can help them understand how to offer a service, change something else that they're doing, but understanding that they're always harvesting that data and it may be used. So we do need to pay attention to how we're using it. But I also love that you brought up that there's bias, because I think we may put bias into our artificial intelligence and be unaware. And I want to talk about that, and then I want to go to a question that we got. But how do you, or actually, I'm going to jump into the question because I think that this will be helpful. So we got a question that came in, which asked, what should small and medium businesses in the US focus on to make it personal or radical transparency and reach out other than working like with maybe our organization? Like what can small and like medium businesses in the US focus on to make it more personal with their organizations?
Yes, and I believe this has to do with the three areas that we presented on the slides to make it personal,
Yep.
be transparent, and reach out. So this study came from serving a lot of organizations, some small, some large, but to make it personal, don't assume that every role in your small organization has the same learning needs. You need to tailor that learning based on people's skills, uh, regions, geographical location, also opportunities that you will see in the marketplace. So when we help this large chemical company to redesign their learning materials, learning roadmaps, we went through all these different inputs, and we use AI to gather personalization. We use content filtering, collaborative filtering, and we're able to use the data that they have in-house with also other similar companies, and we're able to combine that data to have a more personalized experience. Now, being transparent in a small and medium, I think is easier than in large companies. There are less of a business politics. The CEO can sometimes be seen shipping in shipping, or can be helping in the kitchen or whatever. So it's more reachable. There are less barriers to talk to your leadership team. And these leaders need to be transparent. They say, look, our industry is in crisis, for instance, right now in the pandemic. But we think we can pivot to these other areas. We need to be transparent. If we pivot to these other areas, how can your skills be retrained to help us be successful in that area? And then reaching inside and out, there's tons of like open source organizations, chambers of commerce, local meetups that you can tap to gain those skills in that direction that you're lacking as a small and medium business area.
Where do you start if you're thinking about not only upskilling your workforce, but maybe even just incorporating artificial intelligence into your organization? What are some places that you see organizations starting to embrace AI?
I will say that the start is like a set up baseline. Where do you think you are today? So send surveys in your organization and gather that data and compare those results to some of the areas that we mentioned in the study, like what are your soft skills? What do you think is critical for your organization? What are some of the technologies that will impact your business? And then reach out to these local organizations, these meetups, these local learning colleges and high school, like this Tech program. Contact the leaders and say, hey, I have this baseline, I want to be here, how can I close that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. Get out there, survey, figure out where you could be missing. So I want to go
Yes,
back to that question about bias, because
yes.
one example, I talked to another thought leader within the AI space, and her name is Sarah All, and she had talked about an example of what inspired her to get into AI, which was noticing that the organization that she worked for leveraged an applicant tracking system tool. So that's all about our hiring. And so the story that she said is this: she was looking to fill a position. HR had given her a stack of resumes. She looked through them and decided they weren't necessarily the good fit. And so she went back to HR and asked if she could get or repost that job. And then within the hour, HR came back with a stack of resumes. And she said, where did these come from? And HR had responded, well, they came from the ones that were automatically rejected from our applicant tracking system. And when she asked the question, well, what did you use to determine to kick these out? They didn't know.
Yes.
And I feel like that's where we could have bias, or just that our own, I guess, lack of understanding of how AI works can really hurt us, or just
Yes.
push us further away. Can you talk about how that
Yes.
bias can show up, how they can minimize that bias?
Yes. And before I answer that particular question, let me give you a little bit of context. Okay, so on artificial intelligence, which is intelligence demonstrated by machines, there's a field called machine learning. And machine learning, like I mentioned, is using data to be able to train those statistical models and be able to come up with a recommendation, either a classification or a number, a prediction. So within machine learning, there's another subfield. So think this as babusha Russian dolls: AI, machine learning, and then deep learning. And deep learning is the one that is all in favor nowadays. It has achieved significant results in certain areas, such as visual recognition and speech detection. And it's kind of modeled after how the brain works, that you have this input layer and this output layer, and in between you have this series of hidden layers. Thus the name deep learning. Unfortunately, with deep learning, most of the learning is a black box. So you have inputs, these are the features, the characteristics that you want to train your model, and this is the prediction, either a classification, true or false, or span or not span, or a prediction. What is the price of my house, or do I need to hire this person, or whatever. So with deep learning, we're suffering of bias because most of the algorithm is a black box and it's not being exposed to the users. So not only on hiring, also on the legal system, certain algorithms are recommending jail time for people of certain races. Or even in schools, they are denying school applicants to enroll in a particular school based on their race or their socioeconomical capabilities. Or even in my job, I have to use a similar tool to determine pay raises in job evaluations. So if we don't understand the algorithms, then we are very liable to bias. So how do we avoid bias there? So we need to be very transparent on what data is being used, what algorithms are used to train those models, and what are the expected results. But the data that is being used to train these models can have some implicit bias. And I can give you a good example. For instance, if in my class, I say, okay, everyone draws a shoe. So everyone in the presentation here draw a shoe. About 80 to 90% of the people will draw a male shoe, like a business shoe. And very few people will draw like a tennis shoe or a high heel shoe. That's already bias in the input set, implicit bias. And you didn't think about it, but it's already present in your data. So if you use that data and I use that model to show like a sandal, it will give me a wrong answer because the data that was used to train the model is already biased. And then you have other type of bias. So one of the efforts that we have in IBM is to open up all these technologies, and we make a couple of open source. So we have several resources that I will share with you later, and you can share with the attendees, where you can actually see what are the variables that are causing my model to reject or approve that loan, or what are the impact of real data has on the accuracy of the model 3 months from now. Because when I train my model, I have this data, but when I put it into production, I didn't account for the pandemic, for instance. I didn't account for all these external forces, so you can retrain that model. So I will share those resources with you, Jen.
That is so interesting. That's a very, I think, easy example to understand that if the programmer is thinking of a male business shoe, if you will, that it will direct because it's not accounting for the different shoes. And that's, I feel like, a very easy way to understand that we might see things differently. And based on how we see things, if we're the ones that the originator, based on how we see it, and we're not incorporating diversity of thought or making sure that other people are in that conversation, that's when bad decisions can happen. Or, even talking about the bias, knowing that there can be bias built into these algorithms that can make consequences worse for someone else, not offer the same opportunities to the next person. And these are really serious things, and leaders need to understand. And I think this is where, going back to that initial quote, emotional intelligence is so important to artificial intelligence. You need to be able to think about it from a broader perspective. I remember in the white paper they talked about something called AQ, which was, what does AQ mean again? And I do have another question that I'm going to get to from the chat.
It's the ability to adapt to change, that adaptability quotient. So you have EQ and IQ. Now we think another one important is how well you react to change, the adaptability.
Yeah, when we're thinking about hiring people, or we're thinking about who has the right skill set, one of the foundational things is, are they going to be able to handle change? Maybe it's looking at their own organization right now and saying, how well did everyone handle this dramatic shift into a remote space or adjustment to our strategic initiatives? So, question, what changes happened to the training and coaching industry due to AI, robotics, and machine learning? Because I know that those are typically ones where you might see them, and sorry, Sudeep, if I'm getting this wrong, but they are more soft skill driven. They're typically live. How do you see AI impacting that space? Or what changes do you think will happen in that industry of coaching and training as a result of AI, robotics, and machine learning?
Yes, that's a very good question. One area that we have seen in professional training is how we can better target learning to a particular individual needs. So like I was saying, not all trainings fits all. Now we know who's the smarter person in the class, who's the person that needs additional time to complete the exercise, who's the person, I call it tourist students, that just come to the class to mingle with other students or to be away from the office. So we now have more visibility because we can now track individual learning paths. So that's one impact that we've seen. And the other one is what I call the unknowns, things that I don't know. AI will expose those areas that will say, this is an area that you don't know, but it will be a good area based on your experience or the market needs to go into. So those are two places that I see impact.
How do you see it? I want to take that one step further, because in talking about the new collar, so there's clearly a disruption to the education system that is going to happen as a result of AI. I think Google last week just really announced its formal certificate program, where you can just go and get a certificate with their hopes that that certificate will then be the thing that you need, and that employers will recognize that as a sign of completion, a sign of that skill set. And that's going to save, I know for me, if I was going back to college today and had the option to do certificates, that would save so much in student loan debt, so much in time. But how do you see it really disrupting the way that the education system works?
It is huge. And like I mentioned in our T-TEC program, imagine graduating from high school, going to a associate college, community college for 2 years and getting an associate degree that make you employable right away without going through that 4-year college. So that's a huge impact. So we're seeing these pockets of specialized skills in this market gap. So we can have a win-win situation, shorten the education learning to get you right into the working environment at high school. And I was gonna mention another area that we've seen success is these interactions. Sometimes we have been able to create these kind of like a chatbot or a self-service tool that will help you find the resources that you need quicker to complete the training. So that will free up the time of the educator to be able to focus on high value activities such as one-on-one conversations or exploring opportunities for growth. So that's one area.
Yeah. That's we've got a few more questions that are coming in. How do you see online or on-demand training changing with AI? I mean, I know if you're talking about even incorporating the chat box feature, how do you see it changing?
We will see it becoming more engaging, having these AIs, these tools talking with you. So it's not like, okay, go and watch this video and answer these 5 questions. These AI tools will be able to have a natural language conversation with you and poke and find the areas that are weak and provide an alternative learning path that will help you close those gaps in your knowledge, as well as exposing new things, new technologies that you were not aware of that can have a potential impact in your learning.
Yvonne, do you think, and maybe this is my own scared curiosity, but do you think that training with AI could also do something as simple as this, where I'm in a conversation, it's recorded and observed, and then it will spit out maybe, or the data will tell us what I did well, what I didn't do well, and then give feedback to me? Do you see that as being something?
Yeah, yes. However, like we mentioned earlier, watch out for that bias. So
Yeah.
always have those critical thinking skills and challenge whatever feedback you get from this automatic intelligence.
Like that is very mind blowing to me to think that, real time feedback with AI of how that can be used, how you even go about, harvesting that data. That's just so
Yes,
interesting to know that we
yes,
can have that, but also really great for maybe a system that might really understand what these skills like when done well, assuming there's not bias, that's the one that's giving you the feedback versus maybe someone that doesn't understand what that's supposed to look like, but has a brief understanding and then gives you feedback. So then you might learn bad behaviors as a result of that. That's, again, obviously the question of bias. And then the question of ethics comes into play. And we're going to be talking about ethics too tomorrow in tomorrow's webinar. But ethics, what role do you see ethics playing in artificial intelligence? Because I know we talked about soft skills, and there is a question that's talking about, the skills that leaders need to develop themselves and their managers. What ones are most relevant for AI? When you think about ethics and these new challenges that are going to come in, and let's just go back to that first question, what skills do we need to make sure that we have as leaders and that we're building in our team right now?
yes. And this is another critical area on AI because all of these points, this conversation, we think of things in the future, right? Things that we have seen in movies. We talk about the Terminator, the Skynet, all the bad AI. But in fact, today we are programming ethics into our AI algorithms. Let me give you an example. We work with a large car manufacturer in Europe, and we have to program into the self-driving car the decision to, when somebody runs in front of you, to either hit the person or make a right into an abyss and kill the driver, or make a left and collide with an upcoming car and killing all the people in that car. We actually have to make that decision. And it was a very tough
Wow.
ethical decision to make. So this is happening today. Imagine when we have AI-enabled soldiers or drones dropping bombs in areas based on your pictures that you share in social media. So it's a very important area. A lot of companies are working on it. There's an organization called OpenAI that has funded all these efforts, and it will take us another hour to go some of the implications of ethics on AI.
Yes. Oh, well, and even thinking about that yes, a self-driving vehicle will have a range of choices that someone's going to have to choose what choice is the best given the situation. And that's
Right,
really difficult. I don't know if I'd want to be the person making that decision
right,
because
right,
that's pretty heavy. And I
right.
love this. Derek commented, it's not even, going back to that question about how AI can give you feedback. It's not even about how you answer, but think about the expression on your face, your body
Yes,
movements, and all
yes.
of that. That is, maybe they'll say, Jen, you use way too many hand gestures, or you need to smile more because people really think that you're upset. That's just so interesting. It's, Yvonne, I know that we're wrapping up, and you did have some resources to share. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen again and talk through some of those resources, and then I'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Or do you want to talk about those resources? Whatever works for you. But I know you've done your diligence to help everyone further their learning by providing these resources.
Yes, I will send the link to you so we can post it when we publish the video.
Yes.
And I just wanted to share some of the books that I've been reading lately. So I'll share again here with my contact information. Do you see that?
Yes.
So I strongly recommend this book, Rebooting AI. Really informative, really eye-opening. It's particularly around bias in these AI superpowers, because sometimes we have our own bias and we always look at from US, Western Hemisphere point of view. We also have to see it from Eastern cultures as well. So all of those books are highly recommended. My contact information, my Twitter handle. So I will love to hear back from people. What do you think about this presentation?
Yeah, well, Yvonne, I know that I enjoyed it. I think I'm partially, nervous. I'm excited for what AI is. It's just, there's so much that we don't know of how we're going to leverage it. And so it's a little bit, it's new to me, I think. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see how we can leverage it, how it can make us better individuals. I'm going to go ahead and just wrap this up. But Yvonne, going back to everyone, Yvonne shared his contact information. It's also on the screen. Connect with him, ask him questions, let him know. If you want the feedback, or if you want the white paper, we will be sharing that. It's also at the top of the chat from this webinar, but we will be sharing that because it's a great read. I promise you it's going to stimulate a lot of thought. Yvonne, I know that you've got people thinking differently about how we even need to start making changes today to talk about artificial intelligence and how our workforce is actually prepared or has those skill sets. This is so essential. And again, going back to one of those statistics that they shared, that 50% of essentially executives aren't doing anything about this. Or if they are, it just lives in the land of hiring, of trying to hire for that right skill, instead of thinking about how we actually need to be developing our current workforce to make sure they're ready. Yvonne, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And to everyone from Crestcom or that's joining us, just as a reminder, this is our AI week. So we're going to be talking tomorrow to Matthew James Bailey. He's also in artificial intelligence, and he is going to be talking all about artificial intelligence and ethics. So that's tomorrow morning as well, from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Mountain Time, or 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, if you ever want to learn more about Crestcom, maybe we can help you develop your skills, go ahead and contact your local Crestcom representative or ask for a 2-hour leadership skills workshop. And please note or subscribe to our podcast, The Leadership Habit. This will actually be added to that. So go ahead and share it with your friends later. If you know someone that wanted to attend and missed it, have them subscribe to our podcast. This will be posted in a few weeks. I'm going to go ahead and just stop sharing and just come to a close. It's 10 o'clock. I want to say thank you so much to everyone that shared their time with us today. Thank you to Yvonne for sharing your expertise. And I just really appreciate you. And please connect with Yvonne, read that white paper, and I'll see you all tomorrow as we talk about artificial intelligence and ethics with Matthew James Bailey. Thank you so much, Yvonne. Bye.